Hello and welcome to the Fostering Success Michigan Life Domains webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maddy Day and I'm the Director of Outreach and Training with the Center for Fostering Success here at Western Michigan University. And in my role, I oversee the Fostering Success Michigan statewide initiative. Before we get started, I would just like to say thank you so much to our funders, Western Michigan University, the Kresge Foundation, and the Havermill Foundation for their generous support for the work that we do. A few housekeeping items as we get started. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have a question, you may use the questions feature on the side. We will be taking questions throughout the broadcast and answering questions. We'll have some specific time to answer questions at the end. If you have technical difficulties, there's a number on your screen to contact the Citrix team. And of course, as always, a recording of this webinar will be available following the completion of this webinar in the FosteringSuccessMichigan.com website resource library. Additionally, today we have 3 handouts. We will point you to them later. We'll do some quick walkthrough of those later, but just want to point out that on the side you can access those handouts in your panel on the side control panel. It says handouts. There should be 3 there, and those will help guide you through some of the resources that we're going to talk about during our broadcast today. All right, so as we get started, I would like to welcome our special guest today, an expert, Jamie Bennett, training specialist with the Center for Fostering Success at Western Michigan University. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, thank you.
Jamie, as many of you know, is our training specialist, and she oversees the Fostering Success Coach Training Program. So Jamie is here with us. She comes with a wealth of background today, and we're just really excited to have her join us to share her expertise as we kick off our 7 Life Domains webinar series, and as we dive right into education as our first domain. So just to get started, to ground our webinar today, the Education Life Domain webinar is a great webinar, and the toolkit that we're developing really will be targeted towards students, professionals, and supportive adults. And you know, all of those folks who are really looking to understand and gather more information on how they can support increased academic achievement for young adults with experience in foster care. The goals of this webinar will be providing an overview of the 7 life domains by Casey Family Programs. We'll provide an overview of the education domain specifically, and explain why this domain is important, highlight our work in the network, in the Fostering Success Michigan network related to the education domain, and provide resources related to this domain. Again, please do not forget to use the chat or questions feature throughout this presentation to interact. We want to hear from you. We have somebody on standby that will be making sure that any questions that come up do get answered. All right, so let's get started. So as many folks familiar with the work of the Center for Fostering Success know, one of the frameworks that we orient our work around is the 7 life domains. I'm going to provide a very brief overview, but I do want to direct you to one of the handouts that we have available. That is our 7 life domains handout. You can find that on the sidebar. You will also be able to find that on the FosteringSuccessMichigan.com website along with this, this recording. The 7 Life Domains framework came out of research that was done by Casey Family Programs, published in 2006 in their It's My Life framework. And this research really looked at all of the different areas of the life of a young person who is transitioning into young adulthood from the experience of foster care. Early on in the work of the development of the CETA Scholars Program, the 7 Life Domains framework was adapted and really adapted to center the education domain. Of course, because we are an education initiative, we are education programs and organizations. Education is at the center for us, and you know, for the work of Fostering Success Michigan in particular, that work is really driving toward increasing access and success in post-secondary education and professional careers. However, we understand that there's many other facets of life that really contribute to success in education, and that's reflected through the other 6 life domains that surround the education domain. So as we use the 7 life domains, we really do this as a way to offer a framework for both students, the professionals that support them, and the supportive adults in their lives to kind of develop and understand the complexity of their lived experience and really help them identify all the different areas that that a young person must attend to ensure lifelong success. And I'm just going to invite Jamie now if she has any other additions to add to the sort of rationale for the use of the framework for the 7 life domains.
I don't think I have anything to add at this point. I think you covered it.
Okay.
Thanks, Maddy.
Yeah, great. All right, so today we're starting off with the education life domain, and if you follow the work of Fostering Success Michigan, you know that we are actually going to do a whole month of highlighting the education domain. You'll see that reflected in our newsletter, in our social media. We have our Fostering Success Michigan Community Collaborative that will be held at Northwestern Michigan College, focused on education, and at the end of this month, we're actually going to have a podcast featuring a more in-depth and continued conversation between Jamie and myself regarding the 7 life domains framework and the education life domain in particular. So as we start and look at this life domain, as I said earlier, you know, the Center for Fostering Success really has put education at the center of our work. Fostering Success Michigan defines education as including success through middle school, high school, community college, skilled trades, and certificate programs. And so when we talk about post-secondary success, we're not just talking about receiving a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. We're talking about, and this is articulated really in our model, our collective impact model, but we're really talking about a high-quality credential beyond high school, and that's really what we see as necessary to be competitive for all adults in the 21st century, and it's very much in line with the work of our fellow College Access Network partners. Okay, so now is the fun part where I get to ask Jamie some questions, and I have purposefully shared or held off on bragging all about Jamie and the amazing things that she does so that she can tell us a little bit about the work that she does. So Jamie, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do, and then as we see these other questions here, you know, include how the 7 life domains are reflected in your work and what services you offer related to the education life domain in particular.
Sure, thanks, Maddy. So I'll start out with just the top, telling everybody about the work that I do. My background is in coaching, so everything I do really centers around this idea of coaching, and the life domains fit into that in a very integral way. So I spent several years coaching within the Seat of Scholars program, both full-time and part-time, and now I currently oversee and am the lead trainer on the Fostering Success Coach training. So my work is really centered around helping professionals who are doing this work across the country have a set of tools and information and a framework really to follow as they're interacting with students that will allow them to maximize their time with students, use a coaching approach, and help students develop skills so that they can be successful and thrive towards the goals that they've identified in education with an education focus. So so the work that I do is with the Fostering Success Coach training, again just providing various instructional trainings to campus support and child welfare staff and professionals. Mm-hmm. The 7 life domains is a very crucial part of the work that I do, both in the model that I teach, but also just in the practical way that I go about doing coaching in general. So the life domains is a part of the Fostering Success Coach model, so that's the first place I would like to start. What I really love about the life domains is it not only provides kind of a framework for thinking about how we would do our work with our students, but it also provides us a tool to actually do work with the students. In the Fostering Success Coach training, in the Fostering Success Coach model, we use the 7 life domains as an assessment tool. So it is really the first way that we start to talk with students about how things are going for them. And we love the life domains. I love the life domains because what it reminds me when I'm coaching, and what I hope it reminds other folks when they're coaching, is that our work is education focused. We believe that education is the key to success and thriving for our students, but we can't lose those other pieces, like you said a minute ago, Maddy. And so when I'm using the Life Domains framework as a tool to talk with my students about how things are going with them, we are paying attention to things like finances, financial aid, housing, identity, relationships, life skills. All of those are they're pieces of one big puzzle. So coaching, doing direct work with students has to include this holistic viewpoint, which is what the Life Domains remind us.
Awesome.
And so services, what services do I offer related to the education life domain? I think, you know, being a coach training that's housed at a university, that's a part of the Center for Fostering Success, education is the focus of the services that we offer. So I train folks on how they can help students build academic skill, how they can access academic resources, how they can make choices that help them reach their academic goals, you know, all within this vein of education. So we're focusing on that. It is the center of the work that we do. It's the center of our model, and it really kind of underpins the values that we have embedded in our coaching model.
Awesome. You know, I think you did such a great job summarizing sort of the two sides of education that we see in this work, that we, of course, are focused on education as the education success part for our students, but we're also really focused on education for the professionals and supportive adults that we work with. And, you know, I love that you really do education to education of professionals about the importance of education, so it's a little bit of like a cycle kind of there, and putting ourselves always in the space of, just as our students are always learning and always reflecting and growing, that we are also, as the professionals and supportive adults in their life, learning and reflecting and growing, and that there are lots of tools that we also can gain as we learn how to do this work more effectively. And that, you know, I think we would both probably agree on this, that education should be reciprocal. As much as we ask our students to be open to learn from us, we are needing ourselves to be open to learn from our students.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's something that, you know, I have seen really truly reflected within the Fostering Success Coach model. And I think something that, you know, really comes from your background in development, coming from coaching, really coming from working in the field, and the authenticity that that brings to the coach model and to the work of training coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a common saying that many have probably heard that's kind of equated to this notion of professionals also needing to be taken care of, which is secure your own air mask before helping others, right? You hear that on an airplane. But, you know, it's really this, I believe in that philosophy that we have to support those who support the students. And that's really what my work is about. And the 7 life domains help us with that. They help us with a framework of equipping our professionals who are doing this really important work with the students. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. So, you know, this is maybe kind of an extension of what you just said, but as a practitioner, I think it can be easy to kind of get caught up in like, okay, you know, there's theory, there's all these other things, but really how do we get the work done? Can you share a little bit about why, you know, as opposed to other frameworks, the 7 Life Domains framework has really resonated for you in your practical work?
Yeah, practical is the key word. So that's what I would say. We aim to make this work easily accessible for professionals and for students. So we want something that's practical that can be used in partnership. We believe in partnership as a really crucial way for professionals to work with students. And so coaching allows us to do that, allows us to create partnership. And the 7 life domains, education at the center, provides us with a practical way to do that. So for a couple of reasons. Number one, it provides a common language, and when we can speak a common language with the students that we're working with, our work is going to get done faster and we're going to have an easier time at it, you know, when we bring it right down to it, boil it right down. So the life domains provide a common language for us to talk about complicated situations with students in the moment. So it is practical. It's practical. It doesn't take 10 years to learn it. It doesn't even take 10 days to learn it. You can learn how to use this tool in a fairly short amount of time. You can teach your students how to use it in a fairly short amount of time to think about the different situations that they have going on. The other thing I really love about this is that to date, I have yet to find a student situation, positive or negative, that falls outside of the life domains. And so, I mean, that's a really big deal. It's encompassing. It covers everything that we're going to come to the table with, and students are going to come to the table with, so that we're equipped, we're well prepared with something that's practical that provides us language. And I think of it as a practitioner, when I want a tool, that's what I want in a tool. This provides it. This provides it. So
absolutely. And the other part I think that goes along with that is there's no magic to it. We have these 7 life domains. They're really easily understandable, and students very quickly pick up on them and go, yep, this is the domain that I'm having a challenge in, or this is the domain that I want to focus on. So yeah, I think it's a great framework. So to zero in on the education piece of it, you mentioned earlier that you see education as the key to success and thriving, and I really love the word thriving, I think, within there. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the interplay of the life domains with thriving in education?
Yes, absolutely. So, we have an education focus. I believe personally, we believe as a center, as an institution, that education is the key to breaking cycles. Education is the way that our students can be successful in ways that maybe other folks in their life have not been, and that it really provides them a way to have the life that they would like to live, right? And so we believe that education is the key, but you can't leave out the other pieces, right? Especially for our young adults who've experienced foster care, experienced homelessness. Things like finances are a really big deal, and if finances aren't in place, then education might not be possible, right? And so we have to pay attention to how do we help our students access financial resources so that they can go to school and have other bills paid. Housing, really crucial, right? If a student doesn't have stable housing, or they're having a housing emergency, their focus on education might not be possible. Same with health. We could go around all of the life domains. And so education is the focus. We want to stay centered on that because that's where we're helping our students set goals. That's where we're largely interacting with them. For most of us, is on our on campuses, or as they're preparing to graduate high school. Those kinds of settings. And if we only focus on education and don't pay attention to the others, we're probably going to come up against obstacles. So that holistic framework allows us to look at that, but we're always, to think about the focus on education when I'm talking with students and using our coaching framework. Usually my first assessment questions with them, my first questions are on how they're doing, are education questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how your classes are going. Let's talk about, your plans for next year, your plans for this year. And then what usually happens is those other domains start to show up because they are very interconnected, and we can't talk about one without the other. But the education focus being in the center allows us to always come back to that and do that goal setting and long-term planning and work around those areas.
Awesome. I love the way in which all of the domains are so complementary, and I think that as we look at this work, as we continue to learn how to do this work with our students, we also learn about, sort of the increasingly complicated challenges that we find in each of the domains. And so I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the challenges that you have seen related to post-secondary access and success for our students with experience in foster care.
Yeah, we could probably spend our whole webinar talking just about this question, so I'll highlight. I'll keep it brief. So I think, if we stick with education to just start with, I think past educational experiences really start to show up as someone starts to think about going to college or any post-secondary institutions. So things like lots of school changes, which we know statistically happens when you're in foster care. And sometimes even before you enter foster care, we're seeing a lot of school changes, and so that adds up to gaps in education. One math class at this school district is going to be different than this math class, and so on. And when you have students that have maybe changed schools 5 or 6 times, you start to see those consequences add up. So the need for remedial classes, or just not being fully prepared for the college that a young person wants to go to, or the program that a young person wants to go to, is definitely an obstacle that we see come up. And then, you know, move around the life domains from there. Financial aid is a really big issue. I am really proud to say that lots of people are paying attention to this issue,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's more financial resources than ever before. You know, I'm an alumni of CARE, and when I went to college, the financial resource was not as great as it is now for our young people who are trying to access post-secondary education, and that's phenomenal. We can still do better. We can still do better to help our young people leave college without loans. So loans are one of the major things that young adults are accessing when they've experienced foster care. It's a part of that package, and when you leave with lots of debt and you don't have family necessarily that can help financially to fall back on after college, that can become an issue as well. So you know, a real big one in the finance domain. Housing for many of our young people is a fairly significant issue. Housing is expensive, especially if you're living in a metropolitan area or where housing tends to be expensive overall. Accessing affordable housing and then having money left over for things like food and books and, you know, transportation are just really large challenges that get in the way of education, you know, that get in the way of education. And I think that a really classic example that shows up, that shows the way that education, finances, and housing are all very connected to one another is the student who has to choose between working full-time and going to school full-time so that they have enough money to pay for the, you know, the house that they have to live in or the apartment they have to live in. Seeing students working full-time, going to school full-time is very common and incredibly challenging, incredibly challenging. So that's a reality for a lot of our young adults, that those three domains are very much connected together and can provide challenges in engaging in classes, having enough time to study, you know, things like that. You know, and then down to things like health and relationships and belonging, some of those things that are maybe less tangible but are still a really big deal. We know that feeling like you don't fit in is one of the major reasons that young people leave college early and don't complete. And so it's a really common thing when you leave foster care to feel like maybe you're out of place on the new campus that you're at or in the new community that you're in, and there's a high correlation with stopping out early. And so, you know, we see challenges show up in every single domain, and so again, just another reason why we want to think holistically and use the domains when we're working together with our students.
Awesome. I mean, those examples, I think, for all of us probably working with students or even just thinking of our own, you know, experience through post-secondary, we can very quickly see how all of those experiences are very common and just really can snowball quite dramatically. Yeah. And I think that it's like those are the interplay of those are at the root of what gets in the way of achievement and success, right? What gets in the way of persistence, and why we see, you know, such huge gaps in academic achievement for our students with experience in foster care. So given this, so you gave several things, several challenges, which is great. So we asked you, what's one thing attendees can do to improve outcomes in the education life domain for the students that they serve? But my guess is that you may have more than one thing, and I know that we're going to get some resources as well. But I think as we think about those practical pieces, maybe so what is one thing, but I also would maybe ask you from your perspective as a practitioner, as a coach, what is the mindset that can actually, that a professional or supportive adult can have to improve the outcomes in the education domain for the young people that they're serving?
Yeah, thank you. And you're correct. I was going to tell you I can't stop at one thing, but I'll try and keep my couple things brief. So my first thing that I'd like to share as a kind of a recommendation that you can do today to improve outcomes in the education domain is to talk to your students. So there's two things that you can focus on with your students. First is asking them what they need, asking your youth, what do you need to be successful in the education domain? And what pairs and what is just so closely related to that is what is it that they want to achieve in the education domain? And this question, asking them what their goals are in this domain, what they would like to achieve, kind of has a couple things. First, we learn from our students, which is so important, what it is that they want. And second, we know just from the way that the brain develops, and then what things around like trauma and adverse experiences, the research around that teaches us is that young adults, under the age of 25, have a hard time thinking long term. It's just the way that the brain is working at that point in time. Trauma can even make that more significant. And so these long-term thoughts around what is life going to be like for me when I'm 25, when I'm 30, when I'm 35, are sometimes challenging for young adults to think about. And so by asking those questions, we can kind of start to spur that thinking and start to help our young adults bring some shape to what their long-term goals are. With those long-term goals set, we can then help the students start working towards those with smaller goals. Okay, so it's hard to know what to do if you don't know what you're working towards. So helping students set short and long-term goals is a fantastic, in the education domain, is one great thing that you can start doing immediately. And then asking them what they need to complete those goals. I train my coaches, and I talk to folks doing this work all the time about not making assumptions and not making decisions for students. So not doing things for them and not making assumptions. This is just really crucial. So every student is going to have different needs. Even if all of the students or young adults you're working with have been in care, they're going to have different needs and wants and goals. And so when we can check in with them, when we listen well, when we accept what their needs are without judgment, we then can start to customize our approach with them, but still keep in that education focus. So, so I know that feels like it might take a little bit longer or whatnot, but it's so crucial to listen and ask and really take to heart what the students are sharing with you while they're shaping those long-term goals and short-term goals. So that's the first one, is ask your students, listen to them, get their input. The mindset, and this was one of my second things, and Maddy, you gave me a perfect segue. So the mindset that I encourage everybody to think about this work in the education domain that I'm going to offer to you today is teach, don't just tell. So teach, don't just tell. Many of us work, myself included at times, we work from this idea that if we just tell our young adults what they should do, they're going to leave and do it. And for many reasons that we don't have time to dive into so much today, there's a gap there. So there's not always, it's not going to work a lot of the time when we tell someone, okay, this is what you need to do, and then we end the phone call, they leave, and then they don't do it, and we're frustrated, they're frustrated, there's a breakdown there. So what I encourage everybody to start thinking about is, how can I actually teach my students how to do things, not just tell them how to do things, okay? And we call this moving towards skill-based asset development, or skill development in coaching, so that we're sitting with students as they call an admissions office to the program that they want and ask what the requirements are, and then set steps up, action steps, to help them figure out how they can actually go through those. We're not just telling them to call the admissions office and hoping all goes well. If that makes sense. So teach, don't just tell, is a mindset that I would love to encourage everybody to think about as they're interacting with their young adults.
I think both of those things really, I would say that teach, don't just tell, and listen with authenticity. So you're really in a space of, I'm not just like, I hear you, but you're actually listening. And I think that those are different things. Both of those sort of lend themselves, I think, to the natural explanation that this work is long-term work, so to really truly help to improve outcomes in the education life domain, we're not talking about kind of the one and done approach. We're not talking about just come here for 30 minutes and then we'll never see you again. We're talking about intentional relationship building. It doesn't mean that you have to be, it doesn't mean it has to be like 60 minutes every time, but that you're looking at building a relationship over time with the student as they progress toward their goals, and that and so some of that, I think you said this isn't stuff that necessarily happens overnight, but I think the mindset and really the intention behind it is, this is work that will happen over time with consistency, with purpose, and with dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. And we I often share with people that this work is often more successful if we can have a high frequency, low duration. So you're exactly right, Maddy, that teaching skill doesn't take place in one 60-minute session. It usually is going to take place if you can break your 60 minutes up into maybe like a 15-minute face-to-face meeting and then several text messages, phone calls, those kinds of things over time, because that helps us to reinforce those great, soft skills, professional skills that we want students to learn. So again, we're not just telling them what to do, we're helping with very targeted strategies of consistent communication and doing things together with them to teach those skills.
Mm-hmm. Which, I really think all of this kind of circling back really comes to what we talked about earlier, that to do this work well, it actually really requires that the professionals and supportive adults that are engaged in doing this work have resources
Yes.
and engage in spaces where they will continue to have resources to support them to do this work well, and I think that we are always coming from a place of, let's continue to learn. And so if there's another mindset that I would encourage folks to have, it's just the continuing to learn mindset. And that when you come up against challenges or, questions, concerns, the student brought this problem, I've never seen this before, that you engage and embrace with the network of people out there doing this work and the number of resources that are out there to support you as you do this work. So really naturally, that brings us to these resources that we've compiled here. And so if you want to just say a little bit, kind of highlight some of the resources on here that you have found helpful, and I can kind of highlight some of the ones that I also added. But I'll let you go first.
Absolutely. So first, of course, want to mention the Fostering Success Coach training, which I've been talking about today. We teach a coaching approach with our coaching model that does have an education focus, that has a focus on partnering with students, teaching, not just telling, all those things that we've been talking about. So if you want to know more, that's our website. Of course, the Fostering Success Michigan resource website is deep. It is phenomenal. Tons of great resources. I'm sure Maddy will talk more about that. A couple funding resources. Again, I talk about how finances is so closely linked to education. We cannot talk about one without the other in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
So the funding resources, of course, to highlight here, make sure your young adults are filling out their FAFSA. There's new deadlines for the FAFSA. These are really exciting. So just to mention these, you can now start your FAFSA on October 1st for the next year. It used to be January 1st, and so now it's October 1st, which is in less than a month. And so if you have young adults that you're working with that are in high school, currently and not graduating until the spring, they can actually do their FAFSA for their freshman year of college or for their first year of whatever program they want to go into next month. The other really exciting thing, the new change to the FAFSA, is that it's going to take prior year W-2s, and so if your students do have any income to report on the FAFSA, they can do that already. They don't have to wait to file their taxes after the first of the year. So these are great changes to the FAFSA that allow us to start earlier, and if you're not aware, the earlier you start on the FAFSA, the more likely you are to get funds that are limited, so that they're first come, first serve. So I encourage you to start thinking about FAFSA time. It is back upon us already. So that's a huge one. And then ETV Chafee funds, the website is there. These are grant funds that students do not have to pay back. They're earmarked for young adults who've experienced foster care, and just another great resource to limit the amount of loans that students take. Maddy will circle back to the next one. So I love the bottom two here for just general help with thinking about college. So collegescorecard.ed.gov is a really great database that's updated regularly that young adults can go into, and if they're unsure where they want to go, they can plug in things that they might be interested in, programs they might want to study, what kind of campus they would like to be on, all of those kinds of things, and the College Scorecard will give really great information. That is a free service that you can access. And then my go-to scholarship website is fastweb.com. It's a website that's been around for a long time. I used it when I was in college, and they actually have a search engine that allows you to plug in that you were in foster care or experienced homelessness, and it will pull up specific scholarships associated with that criteria among lots and lots of other ones. So any kind of special criteria that might allow you to be eligible for a scholarship, this website will allow you to narrow that down so you can apply specifically for those. So a great resource there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and so I think, with these, you did such a great job explaining explaining all of them. I will add a couple things. So with the Fostering Success Michigan resource website, we actually have a 7 life domains search bar. So if you go to the front page of the website, you will see the options of choosing education, life skills, housing, etc. And so you can go to a specific education page, and that will pull up all of the resources on the website that are flagged as specifically related to the education life domain. So it's a way, one, to kind of get familiar with the website, but also just to really kind of get familiar with what questions might be being asked, what questions might your students have, even if they're not able to voice them, and then what knowledge is out there to be shared regarding success in education. So really encourage folks to access that, to utilize that. I will speak to the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. This is one of my favorite professional resources. The Legal Center for Foster Care and Education does great advocacy work on behalf of young people in foster care toward education success, really all along the education to career pipeline. One of the things that they have that I think are just absolutely invaluable are their issue briefs. They have a number of issue briefs that talk about and really kind of break down some of the complex issues related to education. Many folks are familiar with the ESSA, the new Every Student Succeeds Act that has come out, and that there's provisions in there specifically to increase support for students in foster care, students experiencing homelessness. The law is very complex. It's very dense, and the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education has a great e-brief and then Q&A handout that really kind of highlights the key points. They had one that came out, I believe it was just yesterday, they released it, highlighting what they mean, what this law now means by a point of contact for a student from foster care in the schools on the education side. So for those of you out there who may be looking for, what does this law actually say about this? What's out there to support students in this area? The Legal Center for Foster Care and Education just has a tremendous number of resources. I would also recommend looking up their Uninterrupted Scholars Act Q&A and handout. It does a great job explaining who has a right to be engaged in the education planning for a student with experience in foster care, addressing some of the changes, the amendments to FERPA through the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. The other resource that I will point out is in the handout section on your tool, or your sidebar, your control sidebar, and that handout is a handout that I have probably had around for, I don't know, 5 years, and it came from the National Foster Care Month website that is now part of the childwelfare.gov website, and that is just a really nice handout. I think it's about 2 to 3 pages on what educators can do to support students in foster care. So from that education side, what can you be aware of, what should you know, what can you expect when you understand that a student is in foster care and in your classroom? And for a lot of us that are coming to this work, we may be coming with some orientation toward the child welfare side, but it's very different when you're coming from the education side. So for my child welfare advocates on the webinar today, I encourage you to share this handout with your educators that you're working and hopefully partnering very closely with. And for the educators, I hope that you find this a very valuable resource just to kind of help you orient to being the most supportive person that you can for that student, and understanding the unique role that our educators really do play in education success for our students with experience in foster care. So before we get to a question, so if you have some burning questions out there, we're getting ready to answer those questions. But before we do that, I always like to invite our experts and everyone that I work with to share a humble brag. And by this, we really just mean, share something amazing about the work that you do, something that inspires you about the work that you do, something that you're just excited about with the work that you do. Your work is super important, Jamie. The coaching model that you have developed, the training that you offer is it is a one of a kind. There's nobody else doing this work, and I know it makes me really excited when I get to talk with you about this and see other folks, learning and growing as coaches and being able to offer that skill set to the young people in their life. But I would love to hear from you. What gets you excited? What do you want to brag about today?
Yeah, I'm actually going to deflect my humble brag to my coaches that I've trained. So I am, I'm inspired regularly. After this webinar, I'm going to jump on a training session webinar with a group of folks that are going through our intermediate training. And every time I talk to coaches in the field, I incidentally, before I jumped on this, was talking with a group of folks in California that I had worked with through a training. And the work that's being done with coaching, with looking at how we can best support our students. It's innovative, it is complete, it is done with love and compassion, and I'm amazed and inspired every time I talk to somebody who's in the field doing this work and supporting students. And so to all the folks that I've trained and to those that maybe I haven't trained yet and maybe I've just talked to or those I haven't talked to, my humble brag is going to be to thank you for your work and to keep it up, and I'm happy to be able to support you, in the great work that you all do.
Awesome. And I will second that and echo that. I love the coaches that we work with here. I think Michigan is really unique in that we have an ever-growing network of campus-based support programs that are led by campus coaches, designated support staff that may not be in a position to be a full-time coach, but are very much in a position to be a supportive advocate on the campuses where they're at, and then a very wide network of other child welfare folks, whether they're in the Michigan Youth Opportunities Initiative or our education planners, who really do this coaching work and integrate it into the essential work that they're doing with our young people in foster care. So I love that you gave them a shout out, and I'm super excited that we have such an awesome network to support our students here in Michigan, and I'm excited that you get to share this model as you have been over the last few years with folks in states across the country. So it's really exciting just to kind of see that work continue. All right, so now we are going to welcome any questions. And if you have a question, please feel free to write it in. Let us know. If you have some thoughts or would like further clarification on anything that we talked about today. One question that I do just want to ask off the bat, because I think that I think that this comes up just in general with coaching, Jamie, and so, and I realize we didn't really address it earlier, but can you share briefly, sort of the difference of a coaching orientation versus a therapist orientation, just so folks understand, when you say coaching, what do you actually mean by that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So coaching, I think that the biggest distinction is that coaching is present and future oriented, whereas therapeutic relationships or a therapy relationship is usually present and past oriented. So for example, if a young person is struggling with anxiety, for example, a coach might help that young person come up with some strategies to help them relieve that anxiety so that they can work towards the goals that they've set in education, for example. In a clinical setting, a therapist might say, okay, let's take a look at that anxiety and figure out what's causing it from your past, because if we resolve that, then we'll resolve the anxiety. So I think these roles are very complementary, coaching and therapy. I'll throw in as well mentoring. So there is a distinction between mentoring and coaching, whereas mentoring is really usually has an expertise factor to it where a mentor has some information that a mentee might not. So if a young person, for example, is working with a career mentor, it's because that person, their mentor, is in that career and has some information to provide to the mentee that they do not have. So coaching really departs from that as well, where coaching focuses on this present future orientation. It's goal oriented. It is not problem focused. We are definitely addressing problems with students, so that's a absolute thing that we're doing, but we're also celebrating, we're also looking at long-term goal setting, we're also looking at thriving. So in therapy, to relate back to that, usually if you go in for a problem, once that problem is resolved, you're going to end your therapeutic relationship. And so we are looking at coaching being this space where there's not one expert, yet two experts, which is how it departs from mentoring. And yeah, it's really about creating a relationship and working towards goals and learning skills and yeah, looking towards the future versus the past, or that there's one expert.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's an excellent explanation, and I love that you threw in the mentoring perspective as well. So we do have one question. Is the education domain always at the center? And so if you want to give your perspective, and I can give my perspective.
Yeah, I love this question. So my answer to the question is no, and I do think that people will have different answers to this question. So for me, education is at the center of the work that we do because we are at an institution and that we are focusing on education as the primary function of our work. We are partnering with others who are also doing the same. I've had conversations with folks like, could we use coaching at a homeless shelter, for example? Is that a way that we might be able to the case managers at our homeless shelter might be able to interact with the people who are staying here? And my answer is absolutely. I think coaching is the answer for helping relationships in areas outside of education. If you're working in a homeless shelter, though, for example, your goal with your clients is not going to be maybe getting a bachelor's degree. It's probably going to be to find stable housing, for example. So housing may move into the center because that's the end goal of what it is that you're focusing on. But, in the same exact way, you cannot talk about housing without talking about finances. Right. And you can't talk about finances without talking about education. So they're still connected. Your focus just might be different if your focus of your role is different. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think with Fostering Success Michigan, we engage with a very, very diverse network. And so we have folks from, Michigan Works who are really focused on employment. And of course, their center is going to be finances employment, very similar to our partners over at the Student Scholarships and Grants Office. They're really focused on finances. Of course, how can we get the finances to the students to make sure that they have enough money for, housing, for engaging in the community to be able to, do whatever they might be interested in as well as go to school. And so we also then have awesome relationships with folks in the mental health community and the health community who their focus is really making sure that the young people that they serve are mentally healthy and physically healthy so that they can, then hold down a job, show up to class, ready to learn, all of these things. So yes, absolutely, you can move these, you can move the domains, different domains into the center. And I think it's really for you understanding what your orientation to this work is, and I know Jamie and I have often heard, oh, well, isn't everything a life skill? And it may take a minute to kind of figure out, okay, well, is that life skills? Is that the domain that you're talking about, or are you actually talking about something different? Is budgeting a life skill, or is it really related? Or are we talking about financial planning skill? So I think that that's an excellent question, and I think that also sort of lends itself to the utility of the 7 Life Domains framework as really an excellent sort of overall well-being framework.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. So looks like we have time, I think maybe for one other question. Oh, and I just wanted to give a shout out that question was from Kathy Stewart at Washtenaw Community College. Oh, or we might have another question from Kathy. Sorry, technical difficulties while I'm being slow here. Oh, this is from Kathy. Kathy is a wonderful advocate. So she says, thank you for introducing the 7 Life Domains tool to coaches. It's prompted dialogue about the barriers that would have never come up in conversation when assessing health. I often ask, how is your mood or energy? How have you been sleeping? A student revealed that he had been sleeping on the floor and didn't have adequate bedding. As a result, he lacked sleep and energy, which is impacting him at school. It was a great opportunity to reduce the stigma in asking for help and to build skill in asking or accessing resources. I've shared the 7 Life Domains tool with other folks working with students. Thank you. So thank you, Kathy. That's awesome. And we're happy that this can be utilized. And, you know, I would just say to that, I think your point, the way that I read that, Kathy, is really that within this framework, you know, again, that complexity and the interplay, you know, sort of between the life domains, students sometimes aren't fully aware of how the domains are impacting each other, right? And so giving them a framework where they can have the opportunity to check in across all of those life domains really does allow them to really honor sort of the just general complexity of life and all of the challenges that they may be engaging with. I don't know if you have some thoughts, Jamie.
Yeah, you know, thanks, Kathy, for sharing. And I think what I was reminded of is one of the things I shared earlier, which is sometimes it's easy to rush through and assume that if students need something that they'll tell us. And so a good question in using the life domains is, you know, how are you sleeping? That's a great question in the health domain. And that can have impacts on our education domain. And so that opens the door to talk about things that might be hard to talk about that a student needs. You know, I might need a bed, you know, and that can be a hard thing to come out and say to somebody. So I think that's just such a wonderful example of how this tool again, provides that practical language and gives us space to talk about that hard stuff with students in a way that is maybe a little bit less stigmatizing and builds trust and helps them get what they need so that they can be successful educationally, which, you know, brings us back to center. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's good stuff.
Very good. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us today. I know Jamie has lots to do, so she's going to jump off and join her next meeting that she has. We so appreciate the awesome work that you are doing. And for all of those out there, we do have one last request for you. We would love your feedback. We love to get feedback in real time. And so if you can hang with us, we just have a few questions that we're going to give to you live now. These questions, just so you know, we are always looking for grants to continue to be able to offer you these amazing services, and so we're going to ask you these questions now. You can respond to them live. So we just want to know, how are you attending this webinar? Are you alone? Are you with 2 to 4 other people, 5 to 10 other people, more than 10 other folks? And so it looks like most of you are alone, probably enjoying some solitude today, as it's been a busy week for people. All right, so our next question that we are going to ask is, how likely is it that you will utilize the resources shared during today's webinar? 1, highly unlikely. 2, unlikely. 3, not sure. 4, likely. 5, highly likely. And it looks like most folks are saying likely, highly likely, and that is fantastic. Thank you all so much. And we have our next question here. And so this question really is about how this has increased your knowledge in this life domain. Understanding that this is the first in a series of 7 of these webinars that we're going to have. So today's webinar increased your knowledge of this domain and its importance to youth with experience in foster care. So 1, strongly disagree. 2, disagree. 3, neutral. 4, agree. 5, strongly agree. And it looks like most folks are agreeing, strongly agree, and some kind of in the middle. Awesome. Great. And our 4th question, we're almost done, I promise. Thank you for hanging in there. If you needed to find resources or information about supporting your students from foster care, would you know how? Yes, not sure, no. And it looks like most of you are saying yes. That is wonderful. We hope that you're finding those resources on our website, and then if there's other ones that you have, you're sharing them with us. And now the last question. that we have, let's see here, is would you recommend this webinar to another professional or educator? So remembering 1 is highly unlikely, all the way to 5, which is highly likely. So it looks like most folks are saying likely, highly likely. Awesome. So thank you so much for your feedback. This helps us continue this great work that we're doing. We would love to hear from you if you have any other questions, any other feedback for us as we move through this webinar series. We're very excited that we are going to continue this with experts from across the network. Really excited just to continue learning and sharing and hearing from all of the folks who are continuing to support our students from foster care throughout this work and from their domain. So we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar, and thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to Jamie for her amazing contribution today.